Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Master Your Money, how to build your entrepreneurial and financial mindset to make more money and accelerate your business show. Now, I'm your host, Josh Blakely, and I'm with Pete Wargent here today, and he's going to be telling us some really interesting information around not only creating wealth in business, but actually growing that wealth and setting up your financial future. Now, the reason I put on this event is because as business owners, I would hate to see people just sitting in a place where they're focused on the business side, but they're not actually getting in control of their personal financial situation as well. So I put this show on because I wanted to learn more about it myself. And I've had the opportunity to really speak to some amazing experts in this area, and they're all sharing this information with you for free. So I hope you really enjoyed the show. Now, a little bit about Pete. He's one of Australia's leading finance and housing market analysts. He runs a buyer's agency. He became financially independent at the age of 33, and he's written some really incredible books on personal finance you can check out as well. So over to you, Pete. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Thank you for giving us your time and sharing your wisdom and experience with us.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Josh, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to share whatever I can. And as you said, being an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, it's not just about the business side, it's about managing your money as well. And to a certain extent, once you're doing your own thing, those things are one and the same. You have to manage your cash flows, manage your investments, and grow your business as well.
Excellent. Now, I'd like you to tell us a bit about, I'll give you a brief background for the listeners here, but tell us a little bit more about your experience, what you do, where you're headed at the moment with things.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, as you can hear, I'm British by background, although I'm an Australian citizen for many years now. My kids are also brought up in Australia. So, but initially I trained in my professional career as a chartered accountant in London. And that was what got me the points actually to come over to Australia as a permanent resident many years ago. But I never, although being a CA is a very bread and butter traditional type of career, but I always had that desire, as many young people do today, I'm sure, to be free from the 9 to 5 and constraints that brings. So the thing that I always really struggled with was just having to be in one place for hours on end, meetings that just dragged on with seemingly no purpose. But of course, what I was really, aspiring towards was being able to run my own show where you wouldn't have to be stuck in meetings for hours on end unless you really wanted to be. So my journey, it wasn't an overnight thing. It took me a number of years to get to that position of financial independence and being able to transition across from a full-time role as a CA to running my own business. I run a couple of different businesses, and it's different for every person, but that's the big step for people, having the security of the paycheck, being able to step across. Now, I was quite fortunate in that I had some experience and some luck in investing in the early years. I also had a supportive partner, and that's another thing, as you know, if you've got somebody else who's bringing in a bit of a paycheck, that can really help you to make that leap. I've been doing my own thing now for since I was 33, so I guess it's about 9 years now, showing my age, obviously. And there's a couple of different strands to what I do. So as you mentioned, I've got a property buyer's agency because I had a lot of experience in real estate. I also have a coaching business which helps people to manage their own money and to work as an entrepreneur if that's what they want to do.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about the why behind the buyer's agency and then the coaching side as well, and how do those kind of work hand in hand for what you're doing working with people?
Yeah, so I think, and this is one of the things we encourage people to think about when they're thinking of making the leap or the transition from full-time employment. One of the first exercises you want to go through is what you might call modeling, and that's to look for examples of where people have succeeded at doing that previously. So for somebody who So I've never been, I've always been ambivalent about where returns come from. I don't care if it's from the property market or the stock market or from business. I don't really care. But I did have quite a lot of experience and success in real estate, first in the UK, in and around London, and then secondly in Sydney in Australia. So real estate was something which was an obvious choice because it's something that I had experience in. But it's also, it was a sector where I could see other people had done the same thing. And like the old phrase says, success leaves clues. So I was essentially able in the early days to model businesses that had already succeeded for people. And a buyer's agency is an obvious choice because it's a fee-for-service model. You can sign up clients reasonably easily. You can attract business. You can bring people on board and then deliver that service for a fee. So it was something I'd seen other people do successfully.
Yeah.
I think over time, I mean, that type of business is quite transactional and repetitive in nature. So these days I have somebody else that does the legwork for me.
Sure.
I just focused more on attracting business, and that gave me the opportunity then to focus my time more on coaching and teaching people how to manage their own money and grow businesses, which I think is more fulfills my creative need, and also is something that's a bit more interesting because while buyer's agency can be quite interesting in the early years, it gives you a bit of freedom and you're out of the office. It is ultimately quite a repetitive type of transaction-based business.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd like to dive into that a little bit more about the creativity side of things because I'm always interested to hear how people do that. Is that because every situation might be a little bit different and you're getting to know people and their different business at different stages in that way?
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose there are really, for our types of coaching clients, there are really two different groups. And of course, everybody is different. Everybody has a different personality type. But we essentially have one group of people who are aspirational and they're still in the accumulation phase of their journey. And then we have a smaller group of people who are either retirees or pre-retirees, and they're looking to convert their assets into income and passive income so they can retire. But the bulk of people who come on board, they tend to be a bit nearer to the start of their journey. So they're still building assets, building wealth, and looking for ways to generate passive income streams away from the paycheck.
Yeah.
But as you rightly touched on, every person is different. So we actually do a bit of work on that right up front. There are 9 different personality types. And what you generally find is we do this Enneagram assessment, but mostly people who come on and do our programs fit within 3 certain personality types because that's the type of person that actually cares about money. It's got significance to them. But even within that, every person's situation is different. So that's the real challenge, and the creative aspect is saying to people, okay, well, this is your current situation. This is where you want to get to over whatever the time frame is. And then the interesting and exciting part is actually implementing a plan to get people from where they are today to where they want to get to. And I guess if you're looking for reasons why it's an interesting and exciting thing to do, or just sharing that journey with people over time has got to be the most satisfying part of it, because you can actually say to people, hey, look when you came on board, this is the situation you had then, and look where you've got to today.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the fact that you're actually helping people really nail down, what the end goal is at the beginning and working out their personality style, and that, it's going to change how they want to live their ideal future, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Because what you find is with the different personality types, or take me, for example, chartered accountant, my tendency is to overanalyze. So there's a certain risk of inaction. So what I need is a systematic approach. But it also helps you to understand why you behave the way that you do. So a type 5 like me, investing is all about security, and it comes from an underlying insecurity about money. So our tendency is always to accumulate more and more and more assets for the future. Whereas other people might come on board, the type 7, and that type of person is all about freedom. So they tend to be quite gung-ho in their investing. They're very optimistic. They see opportunities everywhere. And these aren't good or bad personality traits. They're just risks to be managed. And then what you find is the other personality type that comes on is type 3, and they're much more about achievement. And if they inherited $20 million, they would still go off and buy a business because it's all about achievement. So it's just about understanding that we're all different, and we've all got sort of strengths and weaknesses that need to be considered because they actually drive our decisions, whether we realise it or not.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, I encourage the listeners to go and check out the Enneagram to look at what their type is too, and then to see how that might apply to how they run their business and how they manage their finances too. And I love that you brought in the discussion around money with that too, because that kind of leads me to the next question that I'm asking all my guests is, looking back in the past, what was your first experience or memory around dealing with money?
Well, dealing with money, it goes all the way back, I guess, to childhood. And in fact, the most recent book I wrote was about what the rich are teaching their kids about money today, because it goes back to that old phrase, give me the boy of 7 and I will show you the man. And this is what the science shows, that an awful lot of our development and therefore our future behaviour is determined by what we learned in those early years. I'm from a family where my parents separated as a teenager. So my early experience of money was I received pocket money and then later a monthly allowance, but it never lasted a month. I spent it within the first week invariably, usually back in those days on CDs or going to the pub essentially. Even though the legal drinking age in Britain wasn't until 18, but it didn't really seem to apply back then. But so I was never a good money manager, and that really persisted through my higher education years as well as a student. So I usually found that during the holidays I had to go and earn money, and then during the term time I just spent it very quickly again, mostly in the college bar. So I wouldn't say that I was particularly good with money in my early years, but this is one of the things that we try and coach people and stress in our programs, that people, they tend to draw these narratives through their life and say, well, I'm no good with money because X, Y, and Z. Whereas in reality, once you understand what's driving your decisions, anyone can manage their own money successfully. And for that reason, anybody can be a successful entrepreneur as well. But you need to understand the programming that's driven you to be the way you are. And the good news is you can change the programming, but you've got to do it consciously.
Yeah, definitely. It's that awareness that there's actually something there that's causing the current situation, isn't it, before any change can be made?
Yeah, that's right. So I came from a family, so my parents were public sector workers, I guess, in Britain back in the early 1980s. It was all about the miners' strike, and my parents were trades unionists, so not the type of sort of background that was focused on money or investment by any stretch of the imagination. It was only when I started in my professional career, I went to work in the West End of London in Mayfair in a mid-tier accounting firm, and in those kind of firms, you don't have much in the way of the listed company client. What you have is a number of high net worth individuals and small business owners. And it was only then when I got the exposure to seeing the balance sheets and the P&Ls of those individuals and those companies. It's like, oh right, there's a whole other world out there that people are very successfully managing their own money. I suppose that sort of opened my eyes to the other side, if you like, because certainly the socialist viewpoint, and that's the type of family upbringing that I had, was all about, well, you buy your own home, you work until you're 65 and retire on the pension. But of course, these days, as a financial strategy for people, well, there may not be the job security, and there certainly isn't the defined benefit pension scheme that there used to be for most people. So you need a better strategy. So whether that's running your own gig, or whether it's through investing or whatever it is, you need to be in control of your own destiny.
Yeah. And so you had that experience, and did that shift how you were managing your own money, or was it like an instant process, or was it a series of steps? Take us through how that kind of affected your situation at that time when you were working.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't overnight, because like a lot of young people, I was at first excited by the graduate salary, and then as you move up through the pay scales, well, essentially what happens is in the professional practice as a chartered accountant, once you've done the 3 years experience, your pay, well, you essentially become a high rate taxpayer, and that's basically it. But what you very quickly learn is that, well, that might sound good on paper, but of course in Britain we were paying 40 to 50% tax on the top rate, and the rest gets spent quite easily. And it was only when I met my now wife, and I could see that she was from a different type of background from me, and her parents had taught her get on the housing ladder, invest in the stock market, and she'd made these huge inroads into her financial future, and I was still much nearer the beginning. So I think that was the real sort of kick up the backside for me in a good way. So I followed suit. I bought my first place, but also got much more active in the stock market. So yeah, I guess it was a process that took me time. I was pretty lucky, I guess, in that my partner was on the same page, because that's not the same for everybody. I guess when I started out, I was much more focused on investing in the stock market and being a stock picker, because what I did for a living was actually auditing and then like writing annual reports. So obviously I thought, my natural competitive advantage, I understand accounting standards and balance sheets and company P&Ls. So that should be what I should be drawn to. But it took me some time to realise, well, you can study companies until the ink falls off the page, but you can still make cock-ups. So in time, I've moved more towards diversified products and looking to buy them when they're cheap. Yeah. But I've also done a lot of stuff in the property market as well. So I've seen those two asset classes as they're very different, but potentially complementary.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. And can I go back a little bit to the relationship around with your wife when you first met her? Then was there did you have to be quite detailed with your conversation or intentional around your conversation there together, or how did that come about?
No, not really. We're both pretty easygoing sorts of people. I suppose it was more just to me, it was more of an eye-opener to see that the kind of results that you could get if you managed your money sensibly. And it goes back to what Robert Kiyosaki always said in Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that's to pay yourself first. Because if you spend the money first on rent or your mortgage and then the luxuries, then there's very, very little left over at the end of the month and the end of the year. That's just the way the world works. And it's a bit like Parkinson's law number 2. So essentially, the more income you earn, the more tax you earn, and the higher your lifestyle expectation becomes. So it's finding ways to invest money first and then live on what's left. That's the key to success. Because if you don't spend less than you earn, it's very hard to get ahead. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, excellent. All right, thanks for sharing that. Now, I'd like to look into the area of mentors or people that you've learned from along the way. If you could maybe pick one person in your life who's been their greatest help in that side of things, we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I guess, I've always been a hugely prolific reader. So I suppose without sounding too glib about it, I've always, tried to learn from a very broad range of sources. So in the stock market, I've read all the books in Australia, read all the US books. Property market, the same, read all the available books, especially the ones in Australia. The one person who's been most actively a mentor for me over a very long period of time is Michael Yardney, who's he's a well-known real estate personality in Australia. And I've learned a lot from him, and we've learned a lot from each other. But particularly, the thing you find with investing is that it's not all about the skills and the tactics and the strategies that you use. It's also about your own personality and actually raising your self-worth and raising your wealth thermostat. Because what you find is that if people don't increase their self-worth and their thermostat, if they achieve a certain level of success and they don't feel comfortable with it, one way or another, they self-sabotage and then just go back to where they were before. So that's really where Michael has helped me go on to another level, a higher level. It's just by helping me to recognize my self-worth and my strengths, and just to how to deal with the setbacks, because we all get them. That's the reality. You know, it sometimes might look from the outside that you know, some people are just experiencing one success after another, but as almost every entrepreneur surely knows, that's not the way the real world works. You have setbacks, you have good days, bad days, days when you're wondering why you're doing it, or wondering why you even bother with being an entrepreneur. And that's just the nature of it. Michael has been a good sounding board for me over many years, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, that's great. No, I like that you've delved into that too. And again, you looking back on the personality side and really understanding how you function as a person. That's so important. That's so key. So that's great. Yeah. Now, we may have touched on a couple of these ones so far, but because we're looking at the entrepreneurial mindset and we're looking at the financial mindset, it may be a summary of something you've already mentioned so far. But out of those, for the entrepreneurial mindset, what's the one thing that's made the biggest difference for you in that sphere of things?
As an entrepreneur, well, I've done a lot of coaching programs over the years. I think the most important thing that I've learned is that you need to be able to deliver your service in a scalable fashion. Because so whether that's through delegating or outsourcing or finding something that can be set up as a recurring income, if you can't do that, then you quickly reach a bottleneck, and you've essentially created a new job for yourself. So if you try to do everything yourself because you think, well, nobody else can do it as well as I can, that may or may not be true. But the trouble is, you very quickly there is a limit to how much you can do by yourself. So learning to delegate, learning to outsource, learning to put in place systems, and being able to deliver your service in a scalable fashion. Until you can do that, you're pretty much what you have is a self-employed situation, but it's not really a business. So I'm not sure where the source of that information came home. It's something that we do an annual wealth retreat event in Queensland. It's something that every year I come away, with a piece of paper and a to-do list, and it says on that, you don't have to do everything yourself. You must learn to delegate. And I think, particularly for anyone who's looking to become more entrepreneurial, that's a key thing to take away.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And then in the financial side, you might have touched on this already, but what's been the biggest difference there for your financial mindset?
Oh, the absolute, it's the most important role of finance is understanding compound interest. I think it's one of those things that, the human brain isn't really designed to understand numbers in such a way. We tend to think very much about the here and now, and it's hard for the brain to actually appreciate or understand the power of compounding or multiplying your wealth. So this has been Buffett's great genius over the years is just not losing money, because as soon as you lose money, it's just a simple mathematics, really. If you lose 50% of your money, you then have to make 100% to make it back. So rule number one, don't lose money. And then rule number two, compound your net worth, because it doesn't go up in a straight line. And this is how all of the great fortunes have been made over the years, it's usually a combination of leverage and compound growth. So there is no more important role than that, I think, when it comes to managing your own money.
Yeah, that's so key. Understanding that the power of compound interest, and like I imagine for your clients, you show them the forecasting of that growth curve, do you, to help people see the visual side?
Yeah, so actually, with our Next Level Wealth coaching program, what we have is we have a wealth tracking tool, and what it does is it's a very slick tool, and it's quite intuitive. But essentially, what it does, it pulls in all of your information from financial institutions. It's read only, it's secure, but what it does, it shows you your net worth as at today. So all of your assets, your home, your investment properties, your super, your stocks, everything that you've got, your cash, and then a list of your liabilities as well. And what that does is it actually projects just a base case scenario. So essentially, if you do nothing else and you just let your net worth do what it does, it projects that out over 5, 10, 15 years. And it's a really good way to visualize that compound growth in action. But of course, once you've got that base case position sort of down pat, then you can start to think about, okay, well, that's great as a base case, but how can I do much better than this? How can I invest more? How can I invest sooner? How can I save more to invest more regularly? So yeah, and it's one of those things that it's actually much better to do visually, because then you can see the compound growth curve in action.
Yeah, that's key. Now, I think that leads into you've got a free gift that you'd like to give the audience, the Next Level Wealth Plan. I'd love for you to tell us more about that.
Yeah, so it's a free download, free ebook that you can get, and you'll provide the link, no doubt. And the topic of the book is how to go next level wealth in 2020, and it's quite logical. It's a relatively short book, and it's just broken down into a few sections. But what some of the subject areas that are covered there, and we've touched on some of them already. I think first and foremost, you need to understand your borrowing capacity and your property strategy. Now, whether that's as a homeowner or a renter or somebody that rents where they live and buys an investment property, everybody needs a property strategy, because ultimately we all need somewhere to live, even if it's as a renter. So that's the core of anybody's strategy. Then you need to have a think about your career or your business, or if you're an entrepreneur, what is your strategy there for attracting new business? What's your process for showing your clients that you're credible? Do you have credibility indicators? You've got video case studies or testimonials? And what is your process for converting new clients to come on board with you? And then, of course, as we already mentioned, how you're going to have a scalable service or product that you can provide for people. So that's another key aspect. And then I think probably the most important thing is learning to manage your own money. And we talk about the 3 C's, cost, choice, and control. Because if you delegate the management of your money off to somebody else, you can be pretty rest assured they won't care about the returns as much as you do. And of course, it's very expensive. If you pay 1 or 2% of your money every year, in good years and bad, to somebody else to manage your money, it might not sound like a lot, but over 5, 10, 20 years, that's an enormous chunk of your money somewhere else. So learning to manage your own money, of course, gives you total control, and that's got to be the fastest way to financial independence. So those are just some of the key subject areas that the book covers, but it's relatively concise. So yeah, download at the link.
Excellent. Yeah, listeners, definitely check that out. There's a whole slew of information there. And look, Pete, I really want to thank you for everything you've provided here today. There's so much experience, wisdom, and a real place for our listeners to go to make sure that they're actually setting themselves up financially for the future. And then those changes they can be making today that, in time, if they hadn't made those changes, would make a huge impact to the amount of money that they have to compound. So if they have even more money to compound and they've got more money at the end, they can just create even greater legacy as they move through as well. So that's it for today, listeners. But we've got plenty more interviews coming up with real key insights into our financial mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset. So have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Pete, again. Thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure. Cheers.